When we talk about the demigods, it can seem like a monumental task. Elden Ring creates intricate narratives that flow through each other, with just enough missing detail to make multiple interpretations seem likely. We know Radahn was holding back the stars, but was it to stop the falling star beasts or to halt his family's fate? Godwyn the Golden was cut down by the Black Knives so that Ranni could separate her spirit from her Empyrean flesh. But why did she choose him? Questions like these can be their own deep dives, and they only make up a small piece of a demigod's overall story. Today I'm going to do something a little different. Today, I'm going to tell Malenia's story, as best as I can, without getting too bogged down by the multiple interpretations of events. Her story is one of flesh meant to house the Elden Ring itself, were it not for her curse, and how this malady shaped her life through battle under the command of her younger brother. So join me as I take a closer look at Malenia, the Blade of Miquella, the abandoned sister. Welcome back to Square Table Gaming, where we bring you the lore of Elden Ring and Night Rain every week. This week, we're sponsoring ourselves again by asking you to check out our Patreon. With YouTube being the way it is right now, it's becoming harder to sustain the channel. So if you've ever enjoyed our lore dives, or just used us to fall asleep, please consider joining. Like our memberships on YouTube, we're offering early access to our content, but at additional tiers, we've got new perks, like behind-the-scenes looks at our editing process, access to the scripts for all of our videos, and ad-free content. If you want to support the channel and enjoy our entire library ad-free, please consider signing up for the STG Patreon. With that said, let's get back to the demigod, who has never known defeat. Malenia was born a twin to Queen Marika and the second Elden Lord Radahn. She and her brother both came into the world afflicted by curses. Malenia, cursed with rot, and Miquella, cursed with eternal youth. And according to the remembrance of the rock goddess, their parents knew about these maladies right away. This remembrance tells us, Miquella and Malenia are both the children of a single god. As such, they are both Empyreans, but suffered afflictions from birth. One was cursed with eternal childhood, and the other harbored rot within. You can argue that the twins were inherently Empyreans as they were born of one god. However, this translation is often shown to be incomplete, or possibly misinterpreted. That said, we know that Ranni the Witch was chosen as an Empyrean by her own two fingers, so it's likely that Malenia and Miquella were chosen the same way, not simply given the title upon their birth. It's also said that Malenia's Great Rune should have been the most sacred of all, likely because she was a true female heir to Marika. However, her curse ensured she could never be a suitable vessel, as even her Great Rune is afflicted with rot. The goddess of rot was once a known presence in the lands between, until a swordsman with a flowing blade cut down its scorpion vessel, making it impossible for this god to maintain a true foothold in the lands between. It was not until the birth of Malenia that the rot found its way to this golden land again. As for how the rot was able to afflict Malenia in the first place, I think we need only look to the union of Marika and Radahn. These two beings are technically the same person. Radahn is Marika. Whether you interpret that as them having always shared the same body, or Radahn splitting off from Marika so they could both exist independently of each other before fusing back together in the Erdtree, it's an indisputable fact that they are one and the same. With this in mind, I believe that Malenia and Miquella being born cursed is due to the union of their parents, creating some kind of window that other outer gods besides the Elden Beast could utilize in order to find their way to the lands between. In this case, Malenia was touched by the goddess of rot, so that she might someday carry the Elden Ring and bend it to the outer god of rot's whims. Regardless of the circumstances of their birth, Malenia and Miquella were given the title of Empyrean, and likely lived well in their early years. I believe Malenia knew that she could never truly serve as the vessel for the Elden Ring, and so she devoted herself to her brother, a kind young boy who she saw as capable of bringing about a better world for all those in the lands between. She needed to support her brother, and she found her way of doing so through a chance encounter with the very man who once sealed away the goddess of Rot herself. The prosthesis wearer heirloom tells us, though born into the accursed Rot, when the young girl encountered her mentor and his flowing blade, she gained wings of unparalleled strength. Perhaps as a way of quelling the Rot within her, the swordsman taught Malenia all he knew about the blade, so that she might turn toward her brother and act as his hand, helping to bring about a better world. This is when Malenia came to be known as the Blade of Miquella. It's often asked, why do Marika and Ranni have shadows when Malenia and Miquella do not? As Empyreans, they should both have a protector looking out for their best interests. However, I think the reason they were never given shadows is plain to see. Malenia took up the blade for her brother, so what need would either of them have of a shadow? Malenia would take on this role for Miquella, as she herself could never truly fulfill an Empyrean's purpose, meaning that the Fingers would never need to craft shadows for them. They were already loyal to the ways of gold. That is until Miquella realized it offered no way to save his precious sister from the rot that spread within her body. Radagon's Rings of Light tells us it was a gift of gratitude to the young Miquella from his father, Radahn. And yet, the young Miquella abandoned fundamentalism, for it could do nothing to treat Malenia's accursed rot. This was the beginning of unalloyed gold. As the twins aged, Miquella began to question the Golden Order. No matter how much he studied, how much he learned in his travels as Saint Trina, he could not find a way to spare his sister from the rot that had slowly been taking over her body since birth. He himself may be cursed with the body of a child, but that was a problem he would work to solve another time. For now, he needed a way to halt the rot within her, so that she could continue to act as his blade. So it was that he created the unalloyed gold needle, a ritual implement that would ward away the meddling of outer gods. It would not cure his sister, but it would stop the spread of the rot by halting the influence of the outer god of rot within Malenia's body. He would give the needle to his sister, and for the first time, she would feel the rot within herself quell. It was not gone, but it no longer spread. Unfortunately, by the time he was able to do this, Malenia had already lost both of her legs and her right arm to the rot. I assume that all of this took place before the shattering, as we know Malenia released the rot against Radahn, but it's impossible to know for sure. That said, it was after the shattering that Malenia proved herself to be a fearsome warrior. She established the Clean Rot Knights, a force unlike any other in the lands between, whose devotion was so strong it would not falter in the face of their own lives succumbing to the rot. The Clean Rot Knights vowed to fight alongside Malenia, despite the inevitable, if gradual, putrefaction of their flesh. Their acceptance of their fate made these battles the fiercest of all. Miquella would bless these soldiers with an incantation that would ward off the rot, but not halt it entirely as the needle did for Malenia. The Blade of Miquella would command these forces, moving across the lands between as her brother saw fit for her to do. All the while, Malenia hid the truth of Miquella's actions, that he was back in his Haligtree, trying to create a new order all his own. As Malenia's own armor tells us, she once said of Miquella, "My brother will keep his promise. He possesses the wisdom, the allure of a god. He is the most fearsome Empyrean of all." With this said, I believe there are only 2 battles we can specifically point to that Malenia participated in after the shattering. First, we know that Godrick the Grafted held Stormvale Castle, and for whatever reason, he saw fit to chide Malenia and question her strength. For this, Godrick would see himself sorely defeated by this master swordsman, From the little we know about this incident, I don't believe it was a large-scale skirmish, as the way Kenneth Haidt describes it comes across as more of a personal interaction. In this case, Malenia showed her skill against Godrick, and rather than murder him where he stood, she took pity on him after he groveled for his life. However, it's also possible that this wasn't pity at all, and that perhaps Godrick was off-limits from the beginning. We know that Miquella and Godwyn had some kind of relationship through the Golden Epitaph, which tells us Miquella wished for his brother to die a true death, so that he might be at peace. To me, this implies that perhaps Miquella ordered Malenia not to kill Godrick, as he's the last surviving piece of Godwyn's lineage. Either way, Malenia proved her point, and left Godrick a pitiful mess on the floor before moving on. The next battle we know of involving Malenia is the big one, her march against Star-Scourge Radahn. For so long, we as a community theory-crafted as to why Malenia would challenge Radahn in the first place. They fought in Caelid, making her the invading force, and as far as we know, Miquella had no machinations for the throne of Leyndell per se, so why challenge their stepbrother in his own home? Thanks to Shadow of the Erdtree, we finally know the truth of this battle. It was never an invasion. It was the fulfillment of a promise made long ago. Radahn had accepted the vow of a young Miquella, that if he were ever to ascend to godhood, that Radahn would be his consort, so that they might rule the lands between as Marika and Radagon once did before them. However, in order to do this, Radahn needed to fall in battle. Granted, this is a bit of speculation, but Radahn was known to make oaths of honorable death, as he did with Jaren the Witch Hunter, and he likely swore an oath to a young Miquella. It stands to reason that a caveat to acting as Miquella's consort is that Radahn needed to be defeated in battle. So it was that Malenia, Miquella's blade, challenged Star-Scourge Radahn and fought him to a stalemate, sacrificing her own body to the rot so that she might bloom in an attempt to kill him. Before she let the rot flower blossom in Aeonia, she whispered to Radahn, "Miquella awaits thee, O promised consort." In her mind, this was likely when she served her purpose, completing her mission and paving the way for her brother at the cost of her own life. However, one of her army would make sure this was not the end. Cleanrot Knight Finlay. We have a full breakdown on Finlay and her dedicated video, so I won't go too into the weeds here. But suffice to say, Finlay carried Malenia all the way from Caelid back to the Haligtree, so that she might recover alongside her lord brother. However, this was not the end of her story in Caelid, for as the rot flower bloomed, so too did it propagate amongst the newly fallen rot across the land. From the flower grew Millicent and her sisters, Mary the eldest, Maureen the second, Amy the third, and Pollyanna the youngest. Each was born with a piece of Malenia within themselves, but it was Millicent who was born with Malenia's pride. She became a swordsman in her own right, building off the skills she inherited from her mother. With the help of our Tarnished and a prosthetic arm pilfered from the Shaded Castle, Millicent too made her way to the Haligtree, so that she could find her mother and return her pride. Unfortunately, this quest ends with Millicent choosing not to meet with Malenia, instead entrusting us with a very unalloyed needle that once held back Malenia's rot, so that it could be returned to her. However, when we go to do so, we see what has become of Malenia after being returned to her seat in the Haligtree by Cleanrot Knight Finlay. As we enter the arena, we see that Malenia has been sleeping this whole time, with her hand against the tree's roots, waiting for her brother to return to her. Upon waking, she tells us of her dream.
I dreamt for so long. My flesh was dull gold, and my blood rotted. Corpse after corpse left in my wake. As I awaited his return. Heed my words. I am Malenia, Blade of Mikola. And I have never known defeat.
We fight her off as best we can, barely scraping by with a victory. But as we approach the visage of Mikola at the root of the Haligtree, something happens.
Wait. The scarlet bloom flowers once more. You will witness true horror. Now, rot.
The Scarlet Aeonia blooms again, and the goddess of rot has ascended to a power previously thought impossible. Malenia's strength has been unshackled, and she fights against us using the full force of the Scarlet Rot. Except, this isn't true. Malenia still believes that Mikola is sleeping within the Haligtree. As far as we know, she has no knowledge of his cocoon being removed and brought to Mohg's lair. So Malenia is not fully unshackled here. If she were, she could nuke us just as she did Radahn. But she chooses not to, so that she might protect her brother and his tree. The tragedy of this is that she dies for nothing. We defeated Malenia when she could have destroyed us, choosing instead to continue defending her brother. Tragically, he had abandoned her quite some time ago. As we know from Shadow of the Erdtree, Mikola's true plan was always to enter the realm of Shadow and perform the rites needed in order to ascend to godhood. He needed a vessel and the spirit of a lord so that he could become a god. The lord was meant to be Radahn, and the vessel would have been his body, but Malenia ruined it with the rot during their clash. So instead, Mikola needed to use the Omen King Mohg's body and Radahn's spirit. Along the road to godhood, Mikola needed to divest himself of everything that made him the person he was. His Empyrean flesh, his other half, Saint Trina, and even the devoted sister who fought as his blade and never left his side. Malenia was simply the first piece of himself Mikola was prepared to cast into the darkness so that he could achieve his ultimate goal. This means that upon Malenia's return to the Haligtree, her brother showed her no regard and simply moved ahead with his plans. Malenia treated her brother as the hope of the lands between. She devoted herself to him entirely, and in the end, she was nothing more than a disposable tool for the boy who would be a god. Malenia was the blade of Mikola, but once that blade was battered and bruised, Mikola no longer had any use for it, and abandoned her to live in the silence of dreams, until we arrived to face her. Malenia's story is tragic for so many reasons. She was born cursed to be in pain for her entire life, and one of the only people to show her the kindness she deserved, the only person to truly stop the rot spreading through her body, only did so with the intention of using her to achieve his ultimate goal. I'm not saying Miquella had no love for his sister at all, but at some point, he likely understood that he needed to divest himself from all that made him Miquella so that he might ascend to godhood. And without a second thought, he cast aside his sister before anything else, allowing her to spend the rest of her life sleeping through what would come next. Perhaps he thought after his ascension to godhood he could finally cure her of her rot, but I don't know how much credence to give this thought. So it would seem Malenia's faith in her brother was misplaced, and it was that very faith that in the end cost the undefeated demigod her life. But then again, who knows if Malenia is truly dead? After we defeat her, a final Aeonia has bloomed. Perhaps someday this flower will open its petals, and out will step a fully realized Malenia. Unfortunately, we will likely never know. Thank you for joining me as I took you through the life and story of Malenia, the Blade of Miquella. Do you believe she was simply a means to an end for her brother, or did he truly care for her, leaving her behind so that she would not see what he needed to become? Why did the swordsman train Malenia rather than kill her, knowing that she was the second coming of the rock goddess? How many times did the Aeonia truly bloom, and is the rock goddess we faced really her final form? Let us know your thoughts and theories in the comments. Watch that button light up as I say like this video, and if you think we've earned it, please subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss out on any of our lore dives. We look forward to seeing you again for more Elden lore.